World leaders touched down in Rio de Janeiro ahead of the G20 summit, where member states are set to discuss economic cooperation and policies.
COP29 in Baku enters its final phase, aiming to agree on a new climate financing regime as the current one expires next year.
Volodymyr Zelensky says the missiles will speak for themselves after the US greenlights their use to strike targets deeper inside Russia. Slovakians rally against the populist government of Prime Minister Robert Fico on the anniversary of the fall of communism.
World leaders have touched down in Rio de Janeiro on Sunday ahead of the G20 summit, a forum where member states are set to discuss economic cooperation and policies. They were met by Brazil's President Lula da Silva, who will hold bilateral meetings with many leading nations attending the summit. The group of 20 includes members of the G7, as well as countries of emerging economies who are expected to adopt a joint declaration at the end of the summit.
G20 leaders must lead. And G20 countries, by definition, have tremendous economic clout and they yield massive diplomatic leverage. They must use it to tackle key global problems.
The Brazilian presidency laid out 3 priorities that need to be discussed: the fight against hunger, the transition to renewable energy, and the reform of international institutions. But this year's forum is expected to be overshadowed by 2 major wars between Ukraine and Russia and in the Middle East, as well as Donald Trump's recent US election victory.
With the first week over and ministers arriving on Monday, COP29 in Baku enters its final phase. Dubbed the Finance COP, it aims to agree on a new climate financing regime as the current one expires next year. Now, the new collective quantified goal aims for trillions, according to the UN's Trade and Development Organization.
We made this study and we ran a model to try to establish a bracket for the new goal. And we came out with this document that says that the goal should start from 1.1 trillion for next year. And it is more or less in the range of what has been discussed by other studies or proposed by other studies too.
But experts say this will be a challenge to achieve.
No, I think that these are difficult discussions. Let's not try to overshadow the difficulties that we are confronting. And obviously it's not only about the quantum, it's also about the responsibilities within the quantum, what will come from where and for what.
Governments are negotiating the new agreement, but the private sector will play a key role in its implementation. Multilateral development banks like the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development play a key role between countries and companies. Its president, Odile Renaud-Bassot, told Euronews that alongside the financial goal, ambitious policies from countries at COP29 are crucial.
I mean, having a goal is not what is also, it's not the only, a solution per se. So it's a mean, but what is also very important is the commitments taken by all countries around the world about the national determined contribution, how they will, what kind of objectives they set for themselves in terms of level of renewable, getting out of coal, getting out of gas, and so forth. So the national objective each country sets for himself or is very important also. And because having money, if you don't have project, will not deliver anything.
The Secretary General of the International Chamber of Commerce emphasized the need for ambitious targets.
We expect governments to lead on this. We expect governments to actually be seized with the same level of engagement and intensity as when the global financial crisis hit, and we expect action.
At the end of this week, ministers face a critical moment. Will they agree on the new financing goal and announce ambitious policies and projects for their countries?
Volodymyr Zelensky has spoken after a decision came from Washington giving permission for Ukraine to use US missiles to strike targets deeper inside Russia. But despite Zelensky pleading for such permission for weeks, his response in his nightly video address was notably muted.
Сьогодні багато в медіа говорять про те, що ми отримали дозвіл на відповідні дії. Але удари завдають не словами. Такі речі не анонсують. Ракети самі за себе скажуть.
The decision marks a major US policy shift during Joe Biden's final weeks in the White House. Biden had been reluctant to grant Kyiv permission to use US weapons for anything other than defensive purposes. He feared doing so would be a major escalation that could draw the US and other NATO members into direct conflict with Russia. The weapons are expected to be used in response to North Korea's decision to send as many as 12,000 troops to Russia. American and South Korean intelligence officials say North Korea has also provided Russia with significant amounts of munitions. President-elect Donald Trump has signaled that he could push Ukraine to agree to surrender some land seized by Russia to bring about an end to the conflict. Trump, who takes office in January, repeatedly criticized the amount of military aid Washington sent to Kyiv and said he could end the war within a day.
A flag for each fallen soldier. This makeshift memorial in Ukraine's capital Kyiv marks 1,000 days since Russia's full-scale invasion. Many fighters were civilians who, when called upon, left their ordinary lives behind to fight for their country.
Это мой сыночек, Колпаковский Николай, 28 лет, 26 декабря 23 года. Он погиб в Старомайорске. Такой парень был хороший, не женат еще был. Ничего после себя не оставил, никого. Будь проклята эта война, ненавижу ее.
The shrine was created by relatives of the fallen soldiers, driven by a deep need to honor them in the absence of an official government memorial. Sources show the first flags appeared on the lawn on the Independence Square in May of the war's first year. According to Western estimates, some 80,000 Ukrainian soldiers have died in battle so far.
Thousands of protesters have gathered in Bratislava to oppose the policies of populist Prime Minister Robert Fico. The rally coincided with the 35th anniversary of the start of the Velvet Revolution that brought an end to communist rule in the former Czechoslovakia. The protest united opposition parties who all say Fico is a threat to democracy.
Na to, aby sme slobodu a demokraciu uchránili, tak si musíme aj pripomínať. A preto som veľmi rád, že dnes ľudia prišli, aby si tieto hodnoty pripomenuli s nami. Lebo to nie je samozrejmosť, sloboda, demokracia, ale aj veci ako sloboda médií, nezávislé súdnictvo, to nie je samozrejmosť, je to niečo, o čo treba znovu a znovu usilovať.
Fico came to power last year and his government has pushed through a plan to overhaul public broadcasting, a move critics say would give the government full control of public television and radio. Moves to amend a penal code and eliminate a special anti-graft prosecutor has led opponents to worry that he's leading Slovakia down a more autocratic path. Fico ended his country's military aid for Ukraine, opposes EU sanctions on Russia and says he'll block Ukraine's bid to join NATO. The Velvet Revolution took place from the 17th to the 28th of November 1989, one of several anti-communism movements in Eastern Europe at the end of the 80s. Demonstrations and strikes against the one-party government of the Communist Party of Czechoslovakia included people from across the civilian spectrum. The result was the end of 41 years of one-party rule in the country, the dismantling of the centrally planned economy and the transition to a parliamentary democracy.
Russia's exiled anti-war opposition has so far largely failed to speak with one voice and present a clear plan of action. But it was a different scene on Sunday in central Berlin. Prominent Russian opposition figures led a march of at least 1,000 people against the war in Ukraine and calling for democracy in the motherland. Yulia Navalnaya, the widow of Alexei Navalny, as well as Ilya Yashin and Vladimir Kara-Murza were among the protesters. Their demands were highly optimistic but clear. Immediate withdrawal of Russian troops from Ukraine, trial of Vladimir Putin as a war criminal, and the release of all political prisoners in Russia. The unification of the opposition finally happened as a result of a landmark East-West prisoner swap in August that freed key dissidents and helped to reinvigorate a movement that was fractured by the death in prison of Navalny.
Pope Francis has called for a probe into whether Israel's attacks in Gaza amount to genocide, according to excerpts from an upcoming book being released on Tuesday and based on interviews with the Pope. This is his first open call for such investigations. Israel has continuously denied any accusation of genocide. On Sunday, the Pope also addressed St. Peter's Square on the World Day of the Poor.
La guerra rende disumani, induce a tollerare crimini inaccettabili. I governanti ascoltino il grido dei popoli che chiedono pace.
In northern Gaza, a strike on a residential building in Beit Lahiya killed at least 72 people and wounded dozens, according to Palestinian health officials. Strikes also killed 10 in the Nuseirat and Bureij refugee camps and 2 on Gaza's main highway, according to Al-Aqsa Martyr Hospital. The latest killings has brought the Palestinian death toll to over 43,800 Palestinians, according to health officials, over half being women and children.
Euronews. The news